Hi, I'm Howie, and I want to run through something with you today that's a little bit controversial. And that's that you might need a little bit more than just Scrum to do really good product management. And we're going to look at this through the lens of kind of lean startup thinking. So let's talk about first what Scrum is really good at. And it's this, right? So Scrum's great at taking an idea and giving you a bit of a framework to turn that into product. In fact, if you take a look at most of the Scrum framework, if you look at the Scrum Guide, for example, so much of it really focuses on this, how to build. Yeah, and I'm not talking like, just coding, it does talk about the importance of a cross-functional team, sort of quality that needs to go into this as well. But as a product owner, this is where I struggled when I originally read the Scrum Guide, is it kind of felt that within the sprint, once we've got the product, we have sprint review, and that it's easy to look at that and feel that's the end of our feedback cycle for products. A closed group of people looking at the increment and giving us feedback. Now, I'm not saying that's not valuable. It's super valuable. But it's the difference between a real life experiment for me and a lab experiment. A sprint review is like a lab experiment. It's a closed group of people giving you feedback on something that's not in the wild yet. And that can give us some kind of false feedback loops if we're not careful. And this is where lean thinking really can come to the rescue by adding more to this loop. So once we've got a product, and importantly, once that product is in a live group, now that might not be everyone, it might be an early beta test, but some real people using the thing for a slightly more prolonged period of time, then what we're going to start being able to do is getting some measurements off that. Now, there's an important part here, something I often coach product owners on, is you can't get that measurement very easily after the fact. For example, you might have not had a benchmark or a baseline if you didn't think about it back in your idea phase. So talking to the people building the thing about how you want to measure it as early as possible up here is going to make this much less painful later. Now, the only reason we're taking those measurements or getting that telemetry, if you prefer that word, is because it's going to provide us with tons of data. So, for example, we might have had an idea that by putting out a video about Scrum is going to get us much more excited Scrum people looking at our channel. We build it, we might show it internally, and Stu, the marketing guy, is wildly excited by all the neon lights. But actually, until it's out there and we see whether you guys are engaging with it, right, and giving us feedback, we're not sure whether that hypothesis, that idea is really being validated. Now, by looking at that data, we can then start to learn from it. And that's the big important one for me, is this allows us to actually start to think about what's that telling us, right? What's that informing us about what our next idea is? This video got loads of engagement and drove lots of drive. That's great. Or no, you guys are like, no, I wanted more depth, I wanted more detail. It wasn't enough for me. Cool, that can feed our next idea loop. Now, what we're learning here could be quite different from what we'd get from just a closed review from Sprint. They might align, fantastic. Often they don't. And so as product owners, this is very interesting for us because Scrum, as I said, has this absolutely laser focus on this part of the cycle. But actually, as product owners, we need to encompass the entirety of this cycle to really get the most out of it. And that can mean something quite interesting for us too. And probably the last thing I want to sort of end on is, as product owners, don't be surprised if sometimes you feel you're a bit out of sync with the rest of your team because you're often looking at the data from previous work. So you're effectively looking into the past to give you ideas for future work that aren't currently what your team's working on. So then looking into the future. So if you find yourself sometimes feeling a bit disjointed, that's possibly why. And it actually might mean you're doing a really good job.